I learned to stop hoping the year my husband died. Hope, I'd discovered, was a luxury women like me couldn't afford. The boarding house room smelled of old wood and other people's cooking. I sat at the small desk, one hand on my belly where the baby kicked, the other hovering over blank paper. 5 months pregnant, 5 weeks widowed. And I was about to write a letter that would seal my fate one way or another. The candle flickered. My shadow danced against the wall like it was mocking me. I'd been staring at that blank page for over an hour, trying to find words that wouldn't sound like begging. Thomas died of fever 3 weeks before we were supposed to leave for Montana together. I still remembered his hand going cold in mine, the way his breathing just stopped between one moment and the next. His last coherent words were about Montana, about the new start waiting for us. He made me promise I'd go anyway. I'd tried to keep that promise. I'd corresponded with Stephen Weber, the rancher who'd advertised for a wife. We'd exchanged polite letters for months. He seemed kind, practical, lonely. Everything had been arranged until Thomas died and left me carrying proof I'd belonged to someone else first. Now I had to decide, lie or tell the truth. I could hide it, buy a bigger coat. Claim the baby came early after we married. Women did that all the time. But lies were foundations made of sand, and I'd already lost one home. I couldn't build another on deception. My hand shook as I finally put pen to paper. Dear Mr. Weber, I must tell you something that will likely change your mind about our arrangement. My husband Thomas died 3 weeks ago of fever. I am 5 months pregnant with his child. I understand if you wish to withdraw your offer. I would not blame you. But I thought you deserved honesty. If you still wish me to come, I will. If not, I understand. Respectfully, Margaret. The ink blotted where my tears fell. I had to rewrite it twice before it was legible. When I finally sealed the envelope, my hands were still trembling. Then came the waiting. Days stretched into weeks. Every morning I checked for mail. Every morning the boarding house keeper gave me pitying looks that made my skin crawl. I prepared myself for the inevitable rejection letter. Prepared myself to figure out what came next, when there was no next. The telegram arrived on a Tuesday. Come anyway. Christmas week, train fare enclosed. Stephen. I counted the money 3 times, not believing it was real. Held the telegram up to the light, like maybe the words would rearrange themselves into something that made sense. He wanted me to come anyway. I boarded the westbound train the following week, pressing my forehead against the cold window glass. Montana seemed impossibly far away. The baby kicked against my ribs like it was protesting the journey. I placed my hand over the movement and whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry if this doesn't work. The train pulled away from everything familiar. I watched the city disappear and told myself not to hope. Hope was dangerous. Hope could break you worse than loss ever could. But somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, despite everything I knew about survival, I felt it anyway, that small, treacherous flutter. Hope. The Montana cold hit me like a wall when I stepped off the train. My breath clouded in front of my face. Snow was falling, soft and steady, covering everything in white. I gripped my traveling bag and tried to descend the train steps gracefully, which was nearly impossible when you were 5 months pregnant and exhausted from 3 days of travel. I scanned the platform, looking for him. Looking for the moment this would all fall apart. Then I saw him. Stephen Weber stood near the station house, tall and weathered in the way men got when they worked outdoors in all seasons. His coat was patched, but clean. His hat was pulled low against the snow. But his eyes, when they found mine, they crinkled at the corners. He was smiling. I walked toward him, each step feeling like moving through deep water. My hand moved instinctively to my belly, trying to hide what couldn't be hidden. He watched me approach. I waited for his smile to falter, waited for reality to replace whatever kindness had motivated that telegram. His gaze dropped to my obvious pregnancy. Time slowed. My prepared apology rose in my throat. The words I'd rehearsed 100 times. I'm sorry. I understand. Thank you for the train fare anyway. Then he smiled wider. Genuinely, warmly. Margaret, you made it. Like I was expected. Like I was wanted. Like the pregnancy wasn't the disaster I'd believed it to be. Words tangled in my throat. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. Let me get your bag. He took it before I could protest. His movements, easy and competent. Wagon's just over here. It's not a long ride to the ranch. He offered his arm. I took it. Still waiting for the other shoe to drop. Still waiting for him to say, actually, I've changed my mind. He helped me up onto the wagon seat, careful of my condition. His hand steady on my elbow. The touch was respectful. Kind. It made something in my chest ache. The landscape opened up around us as we left town, big sky, snow-covered mountains, endless white punctuated by dark pines. Stephen kept a respectful distance on the wagon seat, not crowding me. He pointed out landmarks as we rode. That's the Peterson Ranch. Good people. And over there's where the creek runs. It's under snow now. But come spring, it's real pretty. Come spring. Like I'd be here that long. Like he was planning for me to stay. I studied him sideways, trying to understand. He was different from Thomas. Thomas had been sunshine loud, laughing, filling every room he entered. Stephen was quieter. The kind of warmth you had to lean in close to feel. He handled the horses gently, his hands confident on the reins. How was the journey? He asked. Long. I imagine so. A pause. Are you feeling all right, the baby? The question was so gentle, so genuinely concerned, that I almost started crying right there on the wagon seat. Fine. We're both fine. Good. That's good. I wanted to ask why he'd said yes, why he'd sent the train fare, why he was smiling at me like I was the answer to something, instead of the problem I knew myself to be. But I was too afraid of the answer, or too afraid there wasn't one that made sense. We rounded a bend in the road. A cabin came into view, small but sturdy, smoke rising from the chimney, warm lamplight glowing in the windows. Something about it looked like hope, which was dangerous. I couldn't afford to hope yet. Here we are, Stephen said. Home? The word settled into my chest and made itself comfortable before I could stop it. Stephen helped me down from the wagon. His hands were careful on my waist, steadying me. The baby kicked, and I saw his eyes flicker with awareness of the movement. He didn't pull away, just smiled that soft smile again and offered his arm. Inside. The cabin was simple, but clean. A fire was already burning in the hearth. He must have lit it before meeting my train. The coffee pot sat on the stove, ready to heat. Everything spoke of preparation, of someone who'd been waiting. Fresh curtains hung in the windows. The floors were swept. A vase of dried wildflowers sat on the table in awkward arrangement, clearly done by unpracticed hands. But there nonetheless. I made up the bedroom for you, Stephen said, setting my bag down. It's not fancy, but it's warm. And there's something else I want to show you. He led me to a door I hadn't noticed, opened it. A nursery, small but complete. A cradle that had clearly been built weeks ago sat waiting. Empty but expectant. A shelf stood ready for baby things. Curtains hung at the window, sewn by the same unpracticed hands that had arranged those wildflowers. The stitches uneven, but determined. I stood frozen in the doorway, my hand pressed to my mouth. "I know it's not much," Stephen said quietly. "I'm not real good at sewing, but I thought the baby should have a proper room." "When did you—" I couldn't finish the question. "Started building the cradle when I got your letter. Took me a few weeks to get it right. Never built one before." He touched the edge of it, almost reverent. "Wanted it to be sturdy." The tears came before I could stop them. Months of holding everything together, of being strong, of carrying grief and shame and fear alone, it all came pouring out. I shook with it, gasping, barely able to breathe. Stephen stepped back, giving me space. "I'll make some coffee," he said gently, and retreated. When I finally got control of myself, I walked into the nursery on shaking legs, ran my fingers over the cradle's edge. The wood was sanded smooth, every corner perfectly joined. This wasn't something thrown together. This was weeks of work, weeks of hope built into wood and nails. I touched the uneven curtain stitches and something broke open in my chest. He'd prepared this before knowing if I'd even come, before knowing if I'd stay. "Margaret." Stephen's voice came from the other room. "Careful. Coffee's ready, if you want it." I found him in the main room, 2 cups already poured. He handed me one, still keeping that respectful distance. Not pushing, not demanding. "I should tell you something," he said, his voice matter of fact. "I can't have children. Fever when I was 12. Doctor said it made me sterile." He said it like stating a simple fact. No self-pity, but I heard the old grief underneath, the dream he'd mourned long ago. "When you wrote about the baby," he continued, "I thought, maybe this is how it's meant to be. Maybe this is the way I get to be a father." I stared at him. "You actually want this baby?" "Yes." Simple. Certain, if you'll let me, if you'll stay." What kind of man builds a cradle for another man's child? What kind of man sees pregnancy as blessing instead of burden? I didn't understand it. Didn't understand him. But standing there in his cabin, holding coffee he'd made for me, looking at the nursery he'd prepared, I wanted to understand. Desperately. "I don't know what to say," I whispered. "You don't have to say anything yet. You just got here. Rest. We'll figure everything else out as we go." That night, alone in the bedroom he'd given me, I could see into the nursery through the open door. That empty cradle waiting, those hopeful curtains. I placed my hand on my belly and whispered, "What if he actually means it? What if this is real?" The baby kicked in response. I took it as a yes. Christmas week settled into a rhythm I hadn't expected. Stephen rose early to tend the ranch feeding cattle, checking fences, chopping wood. I watched him through the window sometimes, studying the way he moved, capable, solitary, lonely in a way that made my chest ache. He'd been alone here for years. I could see it in the way he'd set up the cabin, everything designed for one person. One plate, one cup, one chair by the fire, until I arrived and he'd quietly added more without making a show of it. The mornings were quiet. I'd wake to find the fire already burning, coffee already made. He'd leave it for me and head out to work. It was a kind of consideration I wasn't used to, this wordless care. I tried to help with cooking, though I was clumsy in his kitchen. He never complained. Just ate whatever I managed to prepare and thanked me like I'd given him something precious. The evenings were when we talked. Small conversations at first, both of us careful. He'd ask about my journey, about where I'd come from. I'd ask about the ranch, about Montana. We circled around the bigger questions like they were too heavy to lift yet. One evening, I found myself telling him about Thomas. Testing. Maybe. To see if jealousy would surface. He was good to me. I said, we'd planned this whole life together. Montana was supposed to be our fresh start. Stephen listened, his face thoughtful. I'm sorry you lost him. You're not. It doesn't bother you. That I was his wife first. Why would it? He looked genuinely confused. He was part of your life, part of what made you who you are. I can't be jealous of that. It was the strangest thing, this man who wasn't threatened by my past. Who didn't need me to erase Thomas to make room for him? The night he first spoke to my belly, we were sitting by the fire. I was sewing, trying to mend one of his shirts. He'd been reading, but I felt him watching me. May I? He asked, gesturing to my belly. I froze, nodded. He knelt beside my chair, his movements slow and careful. Placed his hand gently on my stomach, waited until the baby kicked against his palm, then smiled that soft smile. Hello in there, he said, his voice tender. We're getting ready for you, getting everything ready. The baby kicked again, harder this time, like responding. Stephen's face lit up with pure delight. Active one, that's good. Strong. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. This moment was too precious and too terrifying all at once. He wasn't pretending. He was genuinely excited about this baby. My baby. Thomas's baby. Our baby. Do you know yet? He asked. Boy or girl? No, it's too early to tell. Either way is fine with me. He looked up at me, and I saw hope naked on his face. As long as you're both healthy, that's all that matters. After that, it became routine. He'd ask permission first, always. Then talk to my belly while I sat there trying to process this strange, wonderful thing that was happening. He'd tell the baby about the ranch, about the mountains, about how the stars looked on clear winter nights. One day he asked what I craved. I mentioned oranges without thinking I hadn't had one in months. And suddenly, I wanted one desperately. 2 days later, he rode to town through a snowstorm and came back with a bag of oranges. Stephen, you didn't have to. I wanted to. He set them on the table, brushing snow from his coat. You and the baby should have what you need. I ate one that night, the juice sweet on my tongue, and tried not to cry. He'd ridden through a storm for oranges. For me, Christmas Eve. He built the cradle's frame. I watched him work by lamplight, humming tunelessly as he measured and cut and sanded. Meanwhile, I sewed tiny gowns from fabric he'd already purchased, more evidence of his commitment. Bought before I'd even arrived. My stitches got surer as the hours passed. I realized I'd stopped apologizing for being pregnant. Stopped hunching my shoulders like I could hide my condition. When had that happened? When had I started believing, even a little, that this might work? What do you think? Stephen held up the cradle frame for my inspection. Sturdy enough? It's perfect. Not too plain. Stephen. I met his eyes. It's perfect. He smiled, pleased, and went back to sanding the wood smooth. I watched his hands move strong, capable, gentle. Hands that built hope into wood. Hands that touched my belly with reverence. I'd been waiting for his kindness to crack, for obligation to show through pretense. But days passed and the cracks never came. Only more kindness. It was terrifying and wonderful, and I didn't know what to do with it except stop fighting it quite so hard. That night, watching him work, I caught myself counting days until the baby arrived instead of days until I could leave. The shift was so subtle I almost missed it, but it was there, undeniable. I was starting to hope this was real, starting to believe I might get to stay. Christmas morning arrived quiet and holy. Snow had fallen thick overnight, muffling the world. Everything felt suspended, like we existed in a moment outside of time. Stephen made breakfast bacon and eggs, coffee that was almost too strong. I'd learned he liked it that way. Learned the small details of his preferences the way you do when you're paying attention. I sat at the table feeling ashamed because I had nothing to give him. I hadn't expected to be here. Hadn't expected to matter enough that a gift would be appropriate. My empty hands felt like proof of my inadequacy. "I have something for you," Stephen said. He set 2 packages on the table, 1 small box, 1 larger basket. "Stephen, I didn't, I know, it's all right." He pushed the small box toward me. "Open this one first." My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside, nestled in cloth, was a simple gold wedding band. The world tilted. "I know we haven't, really. I mean, we've only just met properly." His voice was nervous, hopeful, uncertain. "But I thought we should be married before the baby comes. If you're willing. I know it's fast. I know I'm probably doing this all wrong, but I want—" He stopped, started again. "I'd like to marry you. Margaret. If you'll have me." I couldn't speak. Could barely breathe. He pushed the larger basket forward. "And this is for the baby." Inside a tiny silver rattle, soft blankets, hand-carved wooden toys, a dozen small things that must have taken weeks to gather. Each one a statement. This baby is wanted. This baby is mine. The tears came hot and fast. I pressed my hands to my face, trying to hold them back, failing completely. "Why are you doing this?" The question came out harsh, demanding. I needed to understand. "Because I want to." That's not an answer. "It's the only answer I have." He leaned forward. "Ernest, Margaret, I prayed for family. For years I prayed. And here you are. I'm not what you prayed for." My voice broke. "I'm someone else's widow, carrying someone else's child. You're exactly what I prayed for. I just didn't know enough to ask specifically." I stared at him. At this man who saw my pregnancy as gift instead of burden. Who'd built a nursery before I arrived. Who spoke to my belly like the baby was already his. "What if you regret this?" The fear spilled out. "What if the baby comes and you realize you can't? What if I'm just Margaret?" He took my hands, gentle but firm. "Let me tell you something true. I've been alone here for 8 years. 8 years of quiet, of empty rooms, of wondering if this was all my life would ever be. Then you wrote me that letter, the honest one, telling me about the baby, and I thought, this is it. This is what I've been waiting for. But you gave me honesty. Let me return it. I want this baby. I want you, not despite anything, just because I've been lonely, and now I'm not. Because I've wanted to be a father since I learned I couldn't. Because you're sitting at my table and there's life growing inside you, and that life could be mine if you let it. That's all. Just because when he placed that ring in my palm, I felt its weight. Substantial. Real. Like it meant something. Like I meant something. I've spent months believing my pregnancy made me damaged goods," I whispered. "You look at me like I'm the gift. You are. 2 words. Simple. But they undid me completely." I wanted to believe him so badly it ached. But belief required trust, and trust required vulnerability. And vulnerability required letting go of the wall I'd built to survive. Could I do that? I looked at the ring in my hand, the tiny rattle in the basket. The man across from me with hope written plain on his face. Yes, I said. Yes, I'll marry you. His smile could have lit the whole territory. We planned a quiet ceremony for New Year's Day. Talked about it over coffee, making plans together like we were partners, equals. I contributed ideas what I'd wear, who we might invite, how we'd arrange things. He listened to every word like it mattered, like I mattered. That night, we sat by the fire after dinner. The silence was comfortable now instead of awkward. Stephen read his newspaper. I mended socks. Domestic. Normal. Right. At some point, without planning it. I leaned against him. Just slightly. Just enough. His arm came around my shoulders. Careful. Warm. I thought, this is what answered prayer feels like. Strange and perfect and not what I expected at all. The baby kicked between us, and Stephen's hand moved to my belly without thinking. I covered his hand with mine, sat there feeling the life we'd made, no. The life we were making. The family we were choosing. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For wanting us. His arm tightened around me. Thank you for staying. We sat like that until the fire burned low. Neither of us wanting to move. Neither of us wanting to break the spell. The week after Christmas, I let myself relax into the rhythm of our life together. Helped with small chores. Laughed when Stephen tried to teach me to make his grandmother's biscuit recipe, and I burned the first batch. Watched him with the horses and understood why they trusted him so easily. We talked about baby names over breakfast. Argued gently about whether Rose or Elizabeth was prettier for a girl. Agreed on James if it was a boy. After his father, life was settling into something peaceful. Something good. Then came the knock on the door. I was washing dishes when I heard it, 3 sharp raps that made my spine stiffen instinctively. Stephen was out checking the far fence. I dried my hands and opened the door. 3 women stood on the porch, bundled against the cold. I recognized the type immediately respectable, religious. Eyes that could cut you down while their mouths smiled. You must be Margaret, the lead woman said. I'm Mrs. Hawthorne. We wanted to welcome you to the community. They didn't wait for an invitation. Just swept inside, bringing cold air and judgment with them. Their eyes went straight to my belly. I watched the calculation happen, saw them measuring, counting months, finding me wanting. My hand moved protectively to my stomach. How lovely that Stephen found someone, Mrs. Hawthorne said, her voice dripping false sweetness. Such a good man. Deserves happiness. Thank you. And already expecting how fortunate. A pause. How long were you married before your husband passed? The question landed like a slap. 5 months. Oh my. And the baby is due in April. Let them do the math. Let them whisper. The other women exchanged glances. Mrs. Hawthorne's smile turned sharper. Well, I'm sure Stephen knows what he's doing. Taking on, well, quite a responsibility. My hands clenched in my skirt. I'd survived this kind of judgment before. Could survive it again, but it still hurt. Still made shame crawl up my throat. Is there something I can help you with? I asked, my voice colder than I meant it to be. We just wanted to make sure you're settling in, that everything is proper. The door opened behind them. Stephen stamped snow from his boots, then stopped when he saw the gathering. His eyes found mine first, reading the tension instantly. Then he looked at our visitors. Mrs. Hawthorne. Ladies. He moved to stand beside me. Not in front, beside. What brings you out in this weather? Just welcoming your bride. Mrs. Hawthorne's hesitation on the word was deliberate. We were concerned about the circumstances. What circumstances? Stephen? Her voice turned pitying. The child. Everyone knows she's expecting. And her husband just died. We're just worried you're being taken advantage of. I felt him stiffen beside me. His hand found mine, squeezed gently. When he spoke, his voice was calm but carried steel underneath. The circumstances are I'm getting married and becoming a father. That's all that concerns us. But Stephen, the baby will be mine. He said it with absolute certainty. Anything else, Mrs. Hawthorne? She blinked, taken aback by his firmness. We're only thinking of your reputation. What people will say. People will talk, no matter what. I don't particularly care what they think. Do you care what I think? Margaret. I looked up at him, seeing him claim us in front of these women, seeing him choose us without hesitation. Yes, I whispered, I care what you think. Good. Then that's settled. He opened the door. Thank you for stopping by. Ladies, Margaret and I have a lot to do before the wedding. They left in a flurry of disapproval and barely concealed whispers. When the door closed, I started shaking. I'm sorry, I said. I've brought gossip to your door. Margaret? He turned me to face him. Do you think I care about gossip? You should. Your reputation. My reputation is my own business. And frankly, I'd rather have you and your baby and the town's whispers than respectability and an empty house. He cupped my face gently. They'll talk. Let them. It doesn't change anything. I heard the judgment in their voices, that particular tone women use when they've decided you're fallen. I'd waited for Stephen to make excuses, to explain me away instead. He'd claimed me, claimed us. Will be mine. He'd said, present tense, certainty, that night, helping with dishes. My hand brushed his. I didn't pull away. Neither did he. Our fingers tangled together for just a moment, but it felt like a promise. The town could whisper all it wanted. This us, this was real. Late January arrived with bitter cold. The baby moved almost constantly now, my body changing in ways that made everything real and terrifying. Stephen had to ride out to check the far pasture, would be gone overnight. He didn't want to leave me alone, but the cattle needed tending. I'll be fine, I assured him. It's just one night. He left reluctantly, making me promise to keep the fire going, to bolt the door. I watched him ride off and told myself I'd be fine, but alone with my thoughts was dangerous territory. It started small. I caught my reflection in the window, saw how obviously pregnant I was now. No hiding it. No pretending. In a few months, there would be a baby. A real, living baby that I'd have to care for. That Stephen would see every day. What if she looked just like Thomas? The thought hit me like ice water. What if the baby had Thomas's dark hair, his brown eyes? What if every time Stephen looked at her, he was reminded that she wasn't really his, that I'd belonged to someone else first? My hands started shaking. What if I was a terrible mother? What if I couldn't do this? What if Stephen woke up one day and realized he'd made a horrible mistake? The spiral started, and I couldn't stop it. I'd be so much trouble. Sleepless nights, a screaming baby, my body recovering. What if the birth went badly? What if something happened to me and he was stuck with a baby he'd never asked? For what if I ruined his life before I fully realized what I was doing? I was packing my bag. My hands moved automatically, folding my few dresses, gathering my things. Survival instinct kicking in the way it always had, leave before you're left. Run before they can send you away. I wrote a note with trembling hands. I can't let you sacrifice everything for my mistake. You deserve better than burden. Thank you for your kindness. I'll never forget it. The words blurred as tears fell. I sat in the rocking chair, bag packed, coat on, note on the table, ready to leave, ready to run. The baby kicked hard, then harder, like protesting. I placed my hand on my stomach. I'm sorry, I whispered. Mama's a coward. The baby kicked again. I started rocking slowly, crying. One hand pressed to my belly. Outside, the wind howled. Inside, the fire crackled, and I sat there, caught between fear and hope, unable to move in either direction. The door opened. Stephen stood there, snow-covered, out of breath. Storm coming. Came back early. He saw the packed bag, the note on the table. His face went pale. Margaret, where were you going? I couldn't speak, just shook my head, tears streaming. He crossed the room in 3 strides, knelt in front of me. Tell me, please. Everything spilled out. I'm going to be so much trouble. The baby. Sleepless nights. I don't even know if I can be good at this. And what if she looks like Thomas? What if every time you see her, you're reminded that she's not really yours? What if you regret choosing me? He took my hands, held them tight. Margaret, do you know what my life was before you? I shook my head. Quiet, empty, lonely. I'd wake up every morning and tend the ranch and go to bed and do it all again the next day. Years of that, just years of silence and empty rooms and wondering if this was all there'd ever be. His voice was rough with emotion. You're not trouble. You're the answer. The baby. Your baby. Thomas's baby. That baby is the miracle I thought I'd never get. And every single day I get to prove that to you is a gift. I'm so afraid you'll regret this, I whispered. Then let me prove you wrong. Every day for the rest of our lives. Let me prove it. I looked into his eyes and saw truth there. No hesitation, no doubt. Just steady. Certain love. The baby kicked against our joined hands. Okay, I whispered. Okay. He helped me unpack my bag slowly. Made tea while I sat wrapped in a blanket, shaking from more than cold. Outside, the storm raged. Inside, he held me while I cried for Thomas, for my fear, for the hope I was finally allowing myself to feel. I'm not protecting you from burden, I said eventually. I'm protecting myself from hope. Because hope can break you if it leaves. Then I'll just have to not leave. He kissed my forehead. I'll have to stay right here and keep proving it until you believe me. That night, I slept with his hand resting on my belly, the baby quiet beneath our warmth. I thought this is what bravery looks like. Not fearlessness, just choosing hope anyway. New Year's Day dawned clear and cold. I dressed carefully in the cream-colored dress Stephen had bought for me, simple but beautiful, cut to fit my pregnant body perfectly. He must have given the dressmaker careful measurements. One more piece of evidence that he'd been preparing for me, wanting me, long before I believed it. I looked at myself in the mirror, and saw someone different than the woman who'd stepped off that train. Not shameful, not hiding, chosen. The church was small, the gathering smaller, town preacher, a handful of townspeople, some curious, some genuinely happy for us, more than I'd expected. Winter light streamed through the windows. The smell of pine from Christmas decorations still lingered. Stephen waited at the front in his best suit, his hair neatly combed, his hands nervous at his sides. When he saw me, his whole face lit up. I walked down the aisle alone. No one to give me away. But I was giving myself, and that felt right. The preacher began the ceremony. Traditional words that I'd heard once before. At my wedding to Thomas. But this time felt different. This time I was choosing with clear eyes. This time I knew what I was saying yes to. Do you, Margaret? Take this man. I do. My voice was clear, certain. Then I added my own words, the ones I needed to say. I take you, Stephen, as husband and father to this child. I choose this family. The baby kicked during the vows, like agreeing. Stephen's voice was thick when he spoke his vows. I take you and this child as my family. I promise to love you both, protect you both, honor you both, every day for the rest of my life. His hand found my belly as he said it, claiming us, both of us. When the preacher said, "You may kiss your bride," Stephen's kiss was gentle and respectful and full of promise. I leaned into it, claimed him. Mrs. Hawthorne was there, to my surprise. She approached during the small reception in the church basement, her expression still disapproving, but slightly softer. Congratulations, Mrs. Weber. Mrs. Weber, my new name, my new life. Thank you. She looked like she wanted to say more, but didn't, just nodded and moved away. I realized with sudden clarity I didn't need her approval. Didn't need anyone's approval, but Stephen's and my own. We walked home through fresh snow, Stephen holding my arm carefully. Our conversation turned to spring planting the garden, fixing the fence in the south pasture, preparing for the baby. What about Rose? I said. For a girl, Rose Weber. He tested it, smiled. I like it. And James. For a boy, James Stephen Weber. Perfect. We were making plans, real plans, for our future, our family. That evening, in the nursery we'd prepared together, Stephen talked to my belly again. Your mama and I are married now, little one. We're ready for you. I placed my hand over his, joined in. We can't wait to meet you. First time I'd spoken to the baby with pure joy. No shame. The difference was enormous. When I said, I do, I wasn't just accepting Stephen's proposal. I was accepting myself pregnant, widowed, imperfect, worthy. I was choosing belief over fear. I was claiming my place in this family not as rescued widow, but as wanted wife. That difference mattered. I'd spent my whole adult life being someone's daughter, then someone's wife. I'd thought I lost my identity when I lost Thomas. But standing beside Stephen, saying those vows, I realized I wasn't losing myself. I was choosing myself. This was my decision, my life, my family. Spring preparations began. We finished the nursery together. I sewed curtains while Stephen painted the cradle white. We picked names, made lists of things we'd need, talked about the future like it was certain. One evening, late in my pregnancy, we sat in the nursery together. Stephen was painting. I was hanging tiny gowns in the small wardrobe he'd built. The baby moved constantly now, running out of room. I placed my hand on my belly. Stephen covered it with his, paint-stained fingers warm against mine. "Soon," he said. "Soon?" I agreed. This is what answered prayer looks like. I thought, not what I expected. Better. April arrived with the smell of mud and new growth. The baby decided to arrive with it. I woke to cramping pain just before dawn. Stephen. Attuned to my every movement now. Woke immediately. "Is it time?" "I think so." He was up and moving, pulling on clothes, banking the fire higher, riding to fetch the midwife while I breathed through the contractions and tried not to panic. The midwife arrived, brisk and competent. Stephen paced outside the bedroom door. I could hear his boots on the wooden floor, back and forth, endless, even in pain. It made me smile. He was more nervous than I was. Hours passed, the pain intensified, but through it all, I thought I'm not alone this time. He's right outside. He wants this baby. Wants us. When the baby finally came fast and fierce and strong-lunged, the midwife smiled. "You have a daughter, Mrs. Weber." "A daughter, Rose?" The midwife cleaned her, wrapped her in the blanket we'd prepared. Then she opened the door. "Mr. Weber, come meet your daughter." I heard his sharp intake of breath, his boots, quick on the floor now. Then he was there, and the midwife placed Rose in his arms. His face, I'll never forget it. Pure wonder. No hesitation, no distance, just immediate, overwhelming love. "Hello, little one," he whispered, his voice breaking. "I'm your papa. I've been waiting for you." Rose opened her eyes dark blue, like all newborns, and seemed to study him. He stroked her tiny hand with one finger, his thumb impossibly large against her impossibility small fingers. "Rose," he said. "Rose Weber. You're perfect." She was perfect. 10 fingers, 10 toes, a cap of dark hair, Thomas's nose. But when Stephen looked at her, he didn't see Thomas. He saw his daughter, just his. Those first weeks were sleepless and difficult and wonderful. Stephen changed diapers without complaint. Walked the floor with Rose at 2 a.m, singing off-key lullabies. Learned to warm bottles, to swaddle, to recognize different types of cries. He was devoted from her first breath, natural at it in a way that surprised us both. The town changed too. Gradually, people stopped by with gifts, baby clothes, casseroles, advice. Rose became Stephen's daughter in everyone's speech. No qualifiers. No whispers about whose blood ran in her veins. One day, Mrs. Hawthorne came by with hand-knitted booties. "Pretty baby," she said gruffly. "Thank you." I accepted the booties graciously. A peace offering of sorts. Summer came. Rose grew. Our family found its rhythm, Stephen working the ranch, me caring for Rose. Both of us learning this new life together. Small, perfect moments accumulated. Stephen teaching me to ride while Rose napped in a basket in the shade. Rose sleeping between us in the big bed, her small body a warm bridge, burnt biscuits and laughter. Stephen reading to Rose even though she was too young to understand. Just because he wanted her to hear his voice, I thought I was bringing Stephen burden, wrapped in shame. Instead, I brought him the one thing he thought impossible: family. And he gave me what I thought I'd lost forever, the freedom to be loved, not despite my circumstances. But within them, Rose was born in spring. But our family was born the moment Stephen smiled at me on that train platform and chose us both. Looking back now, I understand what he meant that Christmas morning. He hadn't prayed for the perfect woman or the perfect child. He'd prayed for family, for someone to love, for purpose. And I'd prayed for acceptance, for a place to belong, for my baby to be wanted. We were each other's answered prayers, just not in the form we expected. That's how grace works sometimes. It arrives looking like complication and reveals itself as gift. I learned that shame dies when love names it blessing. I learned that family isn't blood, it's choice. Daily and deliberate. I learned that sometimes the bravest thing a woman can do is accept that she deserves to be chosen. I learned that widowhood doesn't mean your story ended, just that it took an unexpected turn. I learned that babies born from loss can still be born into love. I learned that some men build cradles before they even know if anyone's coming, because hope is its own kind of faith. Most of all, I learned this. I am not the woman I was when I stepped off that train, terrified, ashamed, certain of rejection. I am Margaret Weber, wife and mother, chosen and choosing. My daughter will never know shame. She'll only know that she was wanted from her first breath, loved before she was born, claimed by a man who calls her his with no hesitation in his voice. And me, I'm still learning to accept grace. Still learning that answered prayers don't always look like we expect. Still learning that family, real family, is built not on perfect circumstances, but on imperfect people. Choosing love anyway. Evening now. I'm rocking Rose in the nursery, her small body warm and heavy with sleep. Stephen sits by the fire, whittling another toy, a small horse this time. Snow falls outside. Winter come again. But this time, I'm not alone. This time, I have a family. I look at them, my husband, my daughter, and think, this is everything. Outside, winter, inside, home.